showing on, but it's not coming up.
Here we go.
It's showing.
Right. Morning, everybody, and welcome. This meeting is being recorded and will be put on the website for the public section of the meeting only. I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting this morning. And we got any declarations of interest? Yeah, sorry, who's that? Yeah.
Caroline?
Yes, Caroline.
Yeah, so just similar to last meeting, as an independent contractor, in the Chief Officer's report, there's mention of the 2C procurement. So it's best if I leave for the report, and if you can just call me back in.
Okay, we'll do that. So we'll record in the minutes that you're declared an interest for the Chief Officer's report and that you're leaving the meeting. Derek, could you make sure that you contact Caroline when the discussion of that item's finished and pull her back into the meeting, please?
Will do, Chair.
Right. And I see we have a new face this morning, one that I recognise actually. I'd like to welcome Alan Chalmers, who is going to be joining us from the May meeting officially as the new service user rep. Provided that we approve the report that's later on the agenda. I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but you're very welcome to join us today, and it's really nice to see you, Alan, in this context. Alan and I know each other from the Kincorth Community Council that he chairs. So, yeah. Right, we've done declarations of interest. Exempt business. We have the exempt.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Can I possibly do a roll call just to make sure?
Of course. Yep. Yep.
Thank you. I have you here, Councillor Duncan. Thank you. Luann Grujon.
Morning, Derek. Hi.
Morning, Councillor Cook.
I believe Alan Gray's. Sorry, I think Alan Gray's on annual leave just now, so that'll be why he's not here today.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Leslie Dunbar.
Good morning, everyone.
Kim Crutington.
Morning.
John Tomlinson.
Yes, present.
Morning. Sandra MacLeod.
Yes, present. Sorry, I couldn't get my mic.
It's okay. Alex Stephen.
Yeah, I'm here.
Caroline Howarth, we've heard from. Thank you. Malcolm Metcalf.
Present and correct. Thank you.
Mike Adams.
Yup, here.
Jenny Gibb.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. Jim Curry.
Yes, good morning.
Morning. Graham Simpson.
Good morning, Derek.
Morning. Maggie Hepburn.
Morning.
Morning. Shona McFarlane.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I have howling dogs in the background.
I'll sign them in as well. Alison Murray.
Morning.
Morning. Howard Gemmell.
Good morning, Derek.
Good morning. I am here as clerk. Angela Scott.
Morning.
Good morning. Kundai Sinclair.
Good morning.
Who is attending representing Jess Anderson, who has tendered her apologies. For your information, Chair, that's all the voting members other than Alan Gray present. We do have some authors and other independents having a look for the public session, and we'll check that at the private. Everybody attending today is indeed reminded that, as the Chair has said, this session is recorded. You may wish to consider switching your videos off during the meeting unless you're participating in any discussion, and likewise similar with muting your microphones. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Derek. And sorry I skipped over that. Right, we're on to determining exempt business. We have item 13, which is the appendices, the exempt appendices to the annual procurement plan. I'd just like to, we'll take that as private business. I just wanted to check if anybody had any comments or questions on that were going to be relevant to passing the recommendations, which are in the public report in item 10. Luann.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, I do have some questions, so I would probably prefer to have the private discussion before agreeing the recommendations.
Okay, what I propose to do then is to shift item 10 to just before the private business. So we'll take items 11 and 12 after the service user rep. We'll take the public bit of the procurement plan, and then we'll move into exempt business, because that stops us chopping and changing, turning the recording on and back off again. Right, thank you for that. Right, we now have the minutes of the last board meeting from the 27th of January. So I'll take them for accuracy and matters arising at the same time, page by page. We have page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. Yes, Luann.
So I'm not sure if I'm quite on the right page, but it was a matters arising. It was to note the suggestion from Alison Murray last time around having a video for the P&G Live under the vaccination update. Just to note that I saw on YouTube that video has now been made. So thanks to Alison for suggesting that. That's certainly been taken on.
Yeah, that's great.
It's good to see. Yeah.
Great. If we could maybe circulate the link to that video, if it's up on YouTube, if we could let board members have the link, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so that was page 9. Page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and page 14. Right, so we're happy to approve those minutes. I don't see any dissent, thank you. So we're on item 5 now, which is the minute of the Risk Audit Performance Committee for the 26th of January. This is for noting, but John Tomlinson as chair, do you have any comments that you'd like to make about it?
Thank you, Chair. Not really. I think in the minute from the last meeting, we did a verbal update, so we highlighted the key aspects. So happy if there's any questions, but otherwise just to note. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions for John? No, right, we'll note that, thank you. And now on item 6, which is the minute of the Clinical and Care Governance Committee from the 12th of January. So again, Leslie, as chair of that committee, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, likewise, I'd just like it noted.
Okay, that's fine. I know we do have the report on the care homes on the agenda for this meeting, which was a referral from that committee. So I don't see anybody with any questions for you at the moment, so we'll note those as well. Thank you. Right, we're on to the business planner now, page 25. I have a couple of amendments to suggest to this, if you don't mind me going in first. So we've had a few service updates issued. On the 23rd of March, we've got a 2C progress update listed. We're coming to the Chief Officer's report, which has an update on the timetable for the tender process for 2C, which won't be even halfway through by the end of March. So I'd like to propose that we shift that 2C update to the board to the May meeting, because the tender process will have concluded by then. And there's also a criminal justice report due to come in May, I think. Yes. So we're due to get the report on the criminal justice inspection. Again, that's referenced in the Chief Officer's report, and we'll come to it in a minute, but the report has now just been published. So I think we can take that in March. So in effect, what I'm proposing to do is swap the 2C report and the criminal justice reports between the March and the May meetings. Yes, Derek.
You may not have seen it yet, Chair, but just minutes before this meeting started, and on behalf of the lead social work officer, Claire Duncan, I have forwarded that report together with a press release to all the members.
Yes, I did see that. Thank you, Derek. Yes. So we'll adjust the business planner as I've suggested just now, unless anybody's got any objections. Yes, Leslie.
It's not an objection, but I thought the meeting on the 23rd had been cancelled. Or have I imagined that?
No, I think if it was wishful thinking, no, we've got to have it because we need to agree, in effect, our budget, which is the financial report. So No, we actually put, the reason that we seem to have met all the time is we had to have a next meeting in January. So we'll be meeting every month for the first quarter of the year. No, we're definitely having a meeting in March.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yes, John Cook.
Thanks, Jay. Just say I'm happy with that change, because if there was something that we needed to discuss on the 2C thing as a matter of urgency, and I've no idea what that might be, we wouldn't be precluded from doing so in March, because it would be in the Chief Officer's report and a matter arising. So yeah, so I'm happy.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or observations on the business planner? Alex.
Chair, probably not the business planner as outlined. You know, we might have to shift a couple more, but we'll see how things go. I think in terms of the, you know, we seem to kind of drop off about the 25th of May. So I think as officers, we need to have a look at this and just see what we can do longer term to give you some certainty, because there will be some of the standard reports that kind of need to come forward for governance purposes, such as the annual report and things like that. So we'll certainly have a look at that and see where that lands, and we'll plan that out. In relation to one of the items, the independent review of adult social care has recently been published, and I think information's been circulated to the IJB on that. I think we probably intend to hold a workshop about that, but combine that workshop with a review of some of the human rights information that's coming forward as a result of the Alliance Scotland report. So the independent review talks about human rights approaches, and I think it'd be wise to kind of maybe try and do two of them together. So we will be looking for a date for a workshop just to kind of talk through that. I see within the agenda there is within the business planner there is a report coming in May around about the independent review. We'll see where we get the workshop programmed in, but May probably seems about right, but at least give the board a chance to have a kind of conversation about what's in there and see where it goes from there.
Yes, I mean, I think I'll come back to the independent review of adult social care because it's referenced in the Chief Officer's report of updates about conversations that are going on about that. That's fine, thank you, Alex. It'll be good to get a feel for the shape of the rest of the year. We need to pick up things like some of the performance reporting. We need to include that in the IJB. Joanne.
Thanks, Sarah. Just one item on that would be also picking up the workforce area and looking at how we're doing around our workforce plan. So that was something to note, not with a fixed date in mind, but just a really important area for us to look at. And my other point was just for members to know that in the March meeting we'll also take a paper that will be updating on the arrangements for chairing of the IJB and of the committees for the next year ahead, just to make sure we have continuity in place for that. So that'll come in March as well.
Okay. Yeah, well remembered, thank you. We also need to include in information on the strategic plan refresh, which is going to start later this year. Okay, fine. I don't think we'll be short of things to look at. Right, thank you. So now we're on to the Chief Officer's report. Sandra, over to you, item 8.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The report's in front of everyone. I think as usual, it goes through like the it's recommended just for noting, but also goes through some local, some national, and information on what's been happening. Just really 2 points of note I'd like to address or bring forward. One of the points is the Care Inspectorate report for the criminal justice is published today, and I think it's been circulated now as Derek's already highlighted. This is a really positive report which reflects the hard work and the commitment of the criminal justice team, and which is ably led by our lead social worker. So the report really highlights the positive impact the services on having people's lives, and also the real integrated approach from both the Health and Social Care Partnership and Aberdeen City Council as well as the criminal justice. So just really to record the thanks for the team on that and that positive report. The other part as well that I'd just like to raise is the independent review of adult social care. as it states, has been published with 53 recommendations. The fuller report will be coming back, but it is hoped that we will have some discussion round about where we are with that and what that will look like, especially against the key themes of the human rights, our unpaid carers, case for the National Health Service, new approach to improving outcomes, commissioning, fair work, etc. So apart from that, really happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sandra. John Cook first.
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of questions. The first one is on the vaccination programme. This morning I had Good Morning Britain on in the background as I was pottering around and having my breakfast and having my coffee and washing up the dishes. And there was a discussion on, I wasn't kind of sitting there making notes, but there was a discussion around the fact that apparently there's been some survey in England on the care homes where they're saying 80% of care homes are reporting that some staff are refusing the vaccine. And there was a comment, and I think I haven't remembered this properly, that there was one care home at least where 30% of staff were refusing the vaccine. As I say, it was I wasn't paying close attention, it was just on in the background. Are we seeing anything like that here in Aberdeen?
No. No, I suppose bluntly we're not. There has, as always will be, some staff who choose not to have vaccinations, which is entirely people's choice. But in the main, no, and we've had quite a high uptake, so significant amount of volumes that have been undertaken across. In fact, we're working our way through our second vaccination doses through the care home residents. So, yeah, some assurance there.
Thanks. Thanks. That's very reassuring, and I know that there are people who probably shouldn't have the vaccine on medical grounds, for example. And then if the clinicians can leap in if I get this wrong, I think caution in pregnant women is one of the areas where there may be a good reason not to have the vaccine. And then the other one, completely different area, just on the 2C remodelling, I just wondered how morale was in the practices, only simply on the basis that folk don't like change, so there may be some uncertainty. Just wondered how things were going.
Well, I just answered, Britt, come in on this chair. So I suppose you're absolutely right, Councillor Cook, with regards to any change, there's always a degree of uncertainty, and that transition period as we move through from certainty to uncertainty can be quite unsettling for staff. There's been a number of meetings that we've been held. In fact, there's a further meeting that's been held with some staff teams tonight at their request. So there has been a lot of engagement with people and just working that through. I think what we will try to do and maintain trying to do is to support staff as best we can while we continue to move forward through this change process.
Thanks for those. I think that's me.
Thank you, John. Leslie next, and then John Tomlinson, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Chief Officer's report. My questions around the justice social work, but first off, I'd just like to say about how I think the positivity of the report is really around the commitment and dedication of staff. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. And also, this is a long-term piece of work that's now, I think we're seeing the fruits of it. So I'm certainly aware of, work that was put in place from about 2014 in terms of the Women's Connection Centre. So congratulations to the Justice Social Work team. I think it's a different matter. I think, clearly, and we'll hear more about this, I imagine, at the next board meeting, but clearly, there are some difficulties being pointed out in terms of mental health services and how social workers access them. And I'm aware of some ongoing work around the custody suite. And I think that's fine if people are being arrested or taken to the custody suite, but I think there's a wider question about, accessing the services that we do need to address. So I just wondered if you could give me a little bit of that. I know it's tricky because it's going to all be reported in a sense at the next board, but it would be a assuring, I think, to see what that is. And I'm also aware there'll be a clinical and care governance meeting in between this, so it's the kind of machinations of how that sometimes works.
Yeah, I can certainly try and respond to that. So I think as the report highlighted, it is something that we're aware of and are working with our mental health teams and our colleagues to look at. And certainly as we move into localities and start to move all our areas into localities, that's certainly helping. But just to give assurance that is on our radar, Councillor Dunbar. With regards to the report, it will say work through all the recommendations and what we'll plan to do, and obviously an action plan will be in place about how we progress in that and moving that forward. And that will be the intent that would be through clinical care governance, and we'd be holding there until, as we would normally do, until the action plan is completed. There would be a reviews until we know that that's been confirmed. So hopefully that's helps with there. Thanks.
That's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, I think we were aware in preparing for the criminal justice inspection that we needed to give criminal justice even more emphasis, particularly to the clinical and care governance route, and have more regular and more formal reporting to your committee, actually. So that's going to be part of the action plan, and obviously that will come to clinical and care governance to look at. Okay,
thank you.
Right. John Tomlinson, and then I saw Mike Adams' hand, so I don't know if Mike still wants to come in after John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Sandra. At 3.7, the Feely report, the independent review of adult social care, it's got quite significant potential implications for us, but I'm assuming this has got a long way to go before any actual implications come through. So just wanted to check that assumption. We basically just carry on our work for the next year or two and wait for an indication of change. Is that the right assumption on this? Is there any indication people have been talking about in terms of timescales?
Can I come in there quickly? Is that all right? So Luann and I attended the chairs and vice chairs meeting, IJB chairs and vice chairs meeting with the Cabinet Secretary last week, where the Feely report was one of the main items for discussion, really. And she made it very clear that decisions on how to take forward the recommendations will sit with the new government after the election in May. But she did actually say we should use the time until the 14th of May to work out what we want and what the key questions are. And so the North East Partnership Steering Group, so the 3 Grampian IJBs, the chairs and vice chairs, are meeting with the chief officers on Friday. We're going to have a quick discussion about Feely. I've circulated for that meeting quite a lot of commentary on the responses from the various stakeholders. So COSLA has responded, chief officers have responded, the Alliance has responded, carers groups have responded. So there's already a wide range of views and opinions on it. And it actually came up at, well, I brought it up actually at the Community Planning Board yesterday. And we agreed an action from that. And I see that Angela's in the meeting. So maybe Angela could come in and update the board on what we agreed to do through community planning yesterday.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I think we noted yesterday that the Feely report makes no reference to community planning partnership, either in terms of what the impact would be of the proposed changes or indeed what contribution the CPP could make to those changes. So we agreed yesterday that the officers would pull some thoughts together and feed them to Councillor Duncan for Councillor Duncan to take them forward into further discussions.
So, I mean, there's lots of moving parts on this because there's lots of stakeholders involved that maybe the Scottish Government aren't aware, because community planning is an incredibly important part of delivering person-centred, community-based social care. So I think we'll have a full discussion on it at the May meeting, which will be after the Scottish Parliament election, when we have a better idea of the sense of direction from the Scottish Government on it. And as far as possible, I would like us to be responding as part of the whole system in Grampian rather than just as an individual IJB, because I think that one of the strengths of our working relationships up here is the partnership working and the fact that we are inclusive and we take into account lots of opinions. And that's not necessarily the case in the rest of Scotland. And I think some of the recommendations from the Feely report reflect how well integration is going in other parts of Scotland rather than the really good practice that we have embedded up here. And I would like that to be noted by the Scottish Government, that we have a very different experience of integration in the North East. So.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful just to understand that part. And certainly, yeah, reading the report, the thing that jumped out to me most was with structural change and the way that takes place, there's a lot on the partnership side that could potentially be lost or watered down, and that's a massive loss if that was the case. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view, and I'm happy to put it on the record now, is that there is an awful lot that nobody could disagree with in this report. The human rights approach, the person-centred approach, the emphasis on unpaid carers, and including them in how we design and make systems work, and particularly for me, the workforce stuff. Care is entirely dependent on the people who provide it, both paid and unpaid, and it's a huge step forward that the need to have a well-trained, well-supported, well-paid workforce is recognised finally in the Feely report. And my fear, if there's a lot of focus on structural change and introducing a national integration joint board and all the rest of it, that all of the attention will be diverted to making those things happen rather than embedding the human rights approach dealing with workforce issues. But we can have a more detailed discussion about this in May, when I probably won't have changed my opinion. But okay. Anything else, John?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Mike, I saw your hand before. I suspect it was on the vaccinations of care home staff, but if you want to come in now on that, and if you want to say something about Feely, I'm very happy to hear you.
It's yeah, you're right. Surprise, surprise. And although Sandra covered it, it was just it would be remiss of me need to say that, number one, we have had no report back of mass refusals of vaccine. Everybody seems to have been on board. It's been encouraged, but it's just for the clarity to John that actually, like only vaccine is voluntary, and therefore medical reasons is not the only reasons. People can just they want to hear it for their own belief. So it's just to make sure that that bit is clear. On the other bit, I have to say that I have grave concerns that on the workforce part, that the good work, certainly in certain areas, because I can only go by our area, and that would become lost in the post, and the politics that come into it would actually, I think, we would lose out. But that is a concern, and hopefully that will be taken on board. But yeah, it's a big concern of mine that the massive progress that there has been since this was a shadow board would be actually lost in the post. So yeah, concerns at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I know that the trade unions are doing a huge power of work trying to get information out to their members to combat some of the absolute rubbish that's on social media about the vaccinations. So that's to be applauded and really welcomed, I think. Okay, Philip, we've made you wait for ages. I'm sorry about that. So you next, and then John Cook.
Chair, that's fine. I put my hand up late, so that's just absolutely fine. Thank you. A couple of questions. So 3.2, the 2C remodelling. There's a sentence there that says that section in the tender process requires applicants to demonstrate a commitment to reducing health inequalities. And I wondered if someone could perhaps give me just an example of what that might potentially look like.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not really sure that So I would seek some advice as to whether I can comment on what should be in a tender proposal from in about health inequalities.
Yeah. Well, I was actually, I appreciate that you can't comment what you should be in a proposal, but the sort of things that you would have been thinking about though that would prompt that question.
Okay, if anybody's going to get into trouble on this, it's probably better if it's me, because you can just blame being a stupid member.
That's good.
So I think what I might say is that we made it very clear in our decision on the 1st of December that we needed to level up provision and ensure continued high quality provision in the more challenged areas of the city, so Torry, Seaton, Woodside, Tilly Drone, that these practices cover. So I think that's what it's referring to. I mean, it's a very valid concern. I think Luann raised it, I raised it, John Cook raised it specifically in December about worrying that we did not want to see any diminution of service in these parts of town.
Thank you.
Hopefully that won't get us sued by a bidder.
I'm sure it won't. That was a very balanced reply, Chair. Thank you. So another question again with regard to this 2C remodelling. My understanding is that the bids that come back won't actually be discussed with the IJB at all. Is my understanding correct? Oh. Yeah. Okay, yes. So we'll just be presented with a fait accompli.
Yeah. We can't get involved in assessing the bids. There's a panel. I think I'll bring Sandra in to explain how the bids will be scored and assessed.
There's a formal process as part of the tender process for the scoring, how each of them is weighted and how that progresses. And there is a panel that is made up of relevant people, experts, plus as well patient reps. So we've got quite a mixed panel that's will hear all the outcomes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So going on to P&J Live, TECA, and the vaccine progress, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I see that we've so now the 65 to 70 age cohort we're all vaccinated by the 18th of February, and that's just unbelievable. But can I ask though, are there any constraints to this vaccination process? I mean, for instance, is there sufficient vaccine? Are there sufficient volunteers, and so on?
So from a recruitment perspective and from volunteers and things, we have been working through that and have managed to recruit staff, and I think that's an ongoing process. So that doesn't seem to be any limitation as we're progressing. But as with anything, you can never tell. With regards to the vaccines, we work with the supplies that we're advised of that are coming through at a national level. So.
Oh, okay, good. So there aren't any constraints at all. Brilliant.
I'm saying we work with the supplies that we're advised of. So whatever supplies we're advised of and whatever volumes of vaccinations that we're given, that's how we would be progressing.
Oh, okay. So you bring volunteers in and stand them down depending on what you're advised, the number of vaccines availability. So
the volunteers, the majority of the vaccinators now are employed vaccinators, and we have a schedule that we're running to over the course of. So for example, there's TECA, but across Grampian there's numerous sites that are already operational. In other areas, for example, Aberdeenshire and Murray as well. So people are worked up on a rota basis. That's why there was quite a lot of volunteers initially till we had to escalate to speed. But now as more permanent staff have been recruited into the posts, that means our volunteers are being able to step back slightly and go and continue with their front-facing roles. For example, our AHP teams ran a couple of pods. We had sexual health running a couple of pods. Our district nurses were all running pods up at TECA. So now as the vaccinators come in, they're able to step that back.
Right, thank you. And just to comment on section 3.7, John Thompson has already mentioned it. I think there are probably significant implications, and you mentioned the Feely report and so forth. Quite interesting. And that's really all I'm going to say. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. No, I look forward to your contributions in the proper discussion that we're going to have at the May meeting. I think that would be, and the workshop. I think the workshop will be really, really interesting on this. Okay, John Cook's hands up now. Next.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it was just a quickie for the avoidance of doubt. When I said that there were some medical reasons for not having the vaccine, I didn't want to suggest that there were lots. They are few and far between. I'll be getting the vaccine when I'm offered it, and I'd urge pretty much everyone to do so. So that was just wanted to clarify that in relation to a comment in the chat. That was it.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that. Thank you, John. Right. Any other comments on the Chief Officer's report? No. Okay. I'd just like to put on record my thanks to the criminal justice team and to Claire Duncan for leading the inspection work. As Angela said in the comment, it's an amazing, phenomenal piece of work, given that they were dealing with the impact of COVID at the time too. And I've read the report, and it's really, really heartening that the team got an excellent rating, which is kind of sector leading for supporting people. And the report says that the service has a transformative impact on people's lives, which is just really, really good to hear. And that they've embedded improvement methodology, and that they're completely committed to a person-centered approach, which is our values as an IJB. And it's good to see them being put into action in the criminal justice sphere. So I think if we can pass back to everybody just our admiration and our thanks for the work that they continue to do. Okay, so that's the Chief Officer's report. Thank you, Sandra. Next is the service users report. For item 9, we're on page 35. Hello, Alison.
Hi. Thank you, Chair. So this report is in relation to the recruitment of a service user rep for the IJB. You'll be aware that in our integration scheme there is allowance for us to have 2 carers representatives and a service user representative sitting on the IJB. Howard, as you will all be aware, has been our service user representative since the inception of the IJB, and he very graciously agreed to have his term of office extended until March of this year. We recruited our 2 carers representatives sort of this time last year, and then the COVID pandemic hit, and that stalled us slightly in terms of progressing the service user representative recruitment. But in effect, it has worked out quite well, because we now have that staggered recruitment, and we won't always have a set of new faces at the same time. So we followed a similar process to the recruitment that we did for the carers representatives, and we have identified Alan Chalmers as the new service user representative for the IJB, and he was introduced to you briefly earlier on. So Alan has a lot of experience, and we are delighted that we have someone of Alan's experience joining us. We learned some lessons from Howard and his experience over the years in relation to improving the support that is provided to the representatives on the IJB, both from officers and from the IJB itself. So we will continue with that for our new service user representative. We also now have our locality empowerment groups up and running, and all of our IJB representatives, the 2 carers and the service user representative, will all be linked into the locality empowerment groups, and will be using that forum as a means to gather the views of the wider carers and wider service users in Aberdeen City to represent their views at meetings here. So I don't think there's really much more for me to say on that report, other than just to recommend it to you that Alan is confirmed as the service user representative, and obviously that we also record our thanks to Howard for the time that he has spent. Howard's final meeting is officially is the next meeting. So Alan is here to be introduced to you all today, and then Alan will shadow Howard at the next meeting before taking up his role officially at the May meeting.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Before I open it up to questions, I just wondered if Howard, if there's anything you'd like to say. This report's about.
I suppose I'd just like to say that I've enjoyed being on the IJB very much, and I hope Alan will as well. I mean, the one comment I would make was that relates to what Alison was saying, really, that I think there was talk in the early days, which really didn't include me, of having some sort of reference group, and certainly I felt a wee bit out on a limb in that, you know, who was I actually representing on the IJB? And well, I think I managed to overcome that problem. I think the involvement with the legs would remedy that to a large extent. And so I think Alan, will be a bit better supported than maybe I was. But that said, I say I've found it a very interesting experience and have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope Alan will as well. So thanks for that.
All right, thank you very much, Howard. Has anybody else got any comments or questions on this? Yes, Luann.
Thanks. Just as we're in this virtual world, just to offer our support to help with Alan's induction, if there's anything IJB members can be doing to help bring him into the IJB world, I'm very happy to do that. I'm imagining that you've got a bit of a plan though, Alison, for Alan's induction, yeah?
Yes, Luann, we do have that planned out, so we'll be working on that. And as part of that, as you say, we'll be looking hopefully to one of the members of the IJB to perhaps buddy up with Alan. Howard is certainly making himself available for a very robust handover to Alan, and they'll be working together over the next month or so. But yes, going forwards, it would be good to have one of the IJB members identified as a buddy for Alan, just somebody that he can ask questions of. The officers will always be available to support Alan, but I think it's useful if there's also a member of the IJB in that role as well.
Thanks, Alison, that's good.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I think this is the right moment for me to put on record my thanks as chair to Howard for all the work that he's done as a service user rep. I can imagine that it must have felt like being a kind of lone sailor on a very choppy sea at times without the support networks and the feedback into the community that you're representing. But I think your life experience has really helped give us a very valuable perspective on the board, and I've certainly appreciated the thought and the work that you've put in. And it's been Howard and I know each other from other lives, as it were, and it was a big comfort to me when I came to my first IJB meeting to see a familiar face around the table. So personally, I'm very grateful to you for the service user rep that you've done, and I'm glad to hear that you've enjoyed it and that you found it valuable. And I'm also very glad that we have learned from your experience and hopefully can improve it for Alan. So he says the same thing in 3 years' time when his term of office is up. But thank you again, Howard. We are very grateful, and our service user and carer reps are an integral part of the board. And I hope that everybody has a valuable experience. Okay, so we have recommendations on page 35, which is to approve the appointment of the new service user rep for a 3-year term from March 2021 to March 2024, and to formally note our appreciation for the work undertaken by Howard Gemmell, the outgoing service user. We're happy to agree those recommendations.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, now we've got the revised model. Yes, we're skipping item 10, so we're putting that to the last item in the public business, which is the procurement plan. We now have the revised model complaints handling procedures. Morning, Martin.
Morning, Chair. Yeah, the report before the IJB presents a revised model complaints handling procedure. The procedure introduced new standardised processes to the handling of complaints, which complies with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman's revised guidance. The SPSO have set a deadline of the 1st of April 2021 for each IJB to submit the revised procedure to them for approval. Just a couple of things I want to highlight in the report. The revised procedure replaces the current template that the IJB is using, although the examples given in that template are still relevant. Also, there are new arrangements for health and social care partnerships handling of complaints about social work services. The SPSO have combined the complaints procedure for the local authority and social work sectors into a single document. Attached to the report are two appendices. Appendix A outlines the full process, which will be followed by the Chief Officer and her leadership team to process any complaints submitted to the IJB. Appendix B is the summarised customer-facing guidance, which provides information for our customers on how the IJB handles complaints. Both of these documents are based upon the SPSO model templates, and it is proposed that the customer-facing guide be placed on the partnerships website once approved. Excuse me. In the drafting of the procedure, officers have consulted with the SPSO and have liaised with another IJB, for which the SPSO have already approved their procedure. During the consultation process, minor presentational issues were highlighted, and it's intended that officers will resolve these ahead of the submission to the SPSO. The recommendations are at section 2.1, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So questions and comments on this? Alison, Alice Murray.
Hi, thanks. Yes. One thing is under stage 2 complaints, I've dealt with quite a few people who've wanted to submit complaints, and not everybody is able to put forward a very clearly presented complaint. There's also a temptation often for people to rant about a much broader range of issues when they're putting a complaint in. So when it comes to a stage 2 complaint, I think it perhaps needs to be clearer that it's always worthwhile contacting the complainant to clarify what the complaint is pretty much, because often they haven't presented what they're actually wanting to complain about very clearly. The other issue I had was about deadlines. Just a thing about that. I've had a complaint deadline extended 5 times, and each time it got extended, there was no reference to the fact that this was another extension and that this was the 5th extension. It was just that, oops, we need to extend your complaint as though it was the 1st extension. So I think there needs to be clear overview of the whole process if you're starting to extend the complaints, and also what the deadlines look like over Christmas, because I think people often, if you're counting the 20 days, there's often not clear whether Christmas counts or not, and I think it would be quite good to have that just clarified. I think that was my main points. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, yeah, I think they're all very good points, and to me it sounds about just the kind of the communication with the complainant and making sure that you are getting the clarity on the original complaint, but also then you're keeping them informed about the deadline, any deadline extensions, and also if there's any public holidays which may extend that deadline. Yeah,
but it's also the fact that if you're extending deadlines, you're aware that you've done it before, so that you're not just sort of thinking that you're adding on another extension. You've only put one extension in. If you're on your 5th extension of the deadline, I think it's important to acknowledge that this is the 5th extension of the deadline. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point, that if there are multiple extensions, actually somebody needs to have oversight of that. So, I mean, it's page 13, so it's on page 65 of the process. Page 13, And that talks about, actually, no, that talks about when somebody can make a complaint, so within 6 months of the issue. Is it possible to build in a kind of a checking process that if a second extension is necessary, somebody has to sign that off? I'm not sure who that would be, but somebody senior needs to sign off that and look at the reasons for needing another extension. I mean, I'm very aware that there are all sorts of reasons why it's almost impossible to be able to predict how long a complaint can take to investigate properly, and proper investigation of complaints is vital. But if we're going to do multiple extensions, I think somebody should say yes, we're extending it again for the right amount of time.
Yeah, happy to look at that and see if we can work that into the procedure.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Thank you. Luann.
Thanks. My question was a very operational one, I suppose, really. On page 102 of the pack, it is the public-facing document, and the email address to complain to is an individual's email address. It's Beverly and the team, and I just wondered, you know, is that covered when she's on holiday, or I would have expected that to be a more generic address for complaints handling. It's just my thinking, just out of concern that could be missed if it's just an individual email.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair. That is one of the kind of presentational issues that we want to pick up. So we will be using a generic email in the finalised version.
Right, Leslie.
I just wondered about who signs this off, and will it come back to us at a future meeting? Or is this it coming today for us to sign off?
So the recommendations at 2.1 are asking the IJB to approve it today, albeit there are some presentational areas that we need to kind of finalise. I'm happy, you know, once we've done that and once we've taken it through the SPSO, to then circulate the finalised version around the IJB for information, if that would be helpful.
That would be good, thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, so we'll circulate the final version round as a service update. I think that's probably the way to do it. Thank you. Any other comments? No, right. Thank you for that. And thank you for that. Those comments, Alison, they were particularly helpful. So we're page 47 is the recommendations, and we're asked to approve Appendix A, which is the revised complaints handling procedure, and Appendix B, the customer facing guide. We're going to approve them subject to the presentational amendments and the amendment about extending time limits being incorporated. And we'll note that any presentational issues will be resolved ahead of the submission to the SPSO, and we'll add in a recommendation that the final version will be circulated to all board members. So we're happy with that. Okay, thank you, Martin. That's a huge piece of work pulling this together. Complaints procedures are so much more complicated to draft than people realise, so well done for that. Thank you. Now we're on item 12, which is Care at Home report. I think this, Anne Mackenzie, talk about this?
Yeah.
Morning, Anne.
Hi. So this report was really requested by the Clinical and Care Governance Committee, and I think it was really perhaps just based on what they had heard, and I think it was really to try and sort of get a better understanding about the way that care at home is being delivered, and also about perhaps some assurance about the activity that's being undertaken. So the report that you have in front of you really describes the transition from our previous arrangements to our new arrangements that took place on the 1st of November. And a successful transition, I need to say, and I think, you know, we need to understand that was no mean feat really to transfer the safe care of all of those people. In particular, thanks to all, given the operational challenges that people had in front of them at the time with the pandemic and with winter. I've also listed the members of the consortium just to refresh people's memory. Just to note that there have been some changes recently with the membership, with uninspired care and specialist resource solutions being added to the members of the consortium. You also have in front of you, I've tried to summarise the numbers of people, and just a word of caution, it is a movable feast, obviously, on a daily basis, but on the 1st of November, 1,296 people successfully transferred into the Granite Care Consortium, and those people transferred under STS option 3, which is where we arrange the care for them and pay for the care for them. What you'll see is that there was also a transition of people, 284 people, into SDS option 2, or took a choice to have their care delivered under SDS option 2, which is really where they direct the support, but it's funded by ourselves. And prior to, sorry, there's another meeting going on, it's got a very lively chat function if that's what you're hearing. And prior to the implementation of this contract, we couldn't really have anticipated this shift. It was quite a shift that happened at the time, and I think the reasons for it were there was a couple of reasons. People had or exercised their choice to remain with their current care provider because they were happy with those arrangements, and also potentially because they were quite attached to their carer, the person who's delivering their care, and I think not having their care delivered by that person was something that they didn't really want to consider. So there was a shift at the time, and it like I say, it's something that we couldn't have anticipated happening because it wasn't the trend prior to this. And I'm not suggesting, or I don't see that shift has continued on the same trajectory. It was a little bit unsettling at the time for providers, but I suppose that was just part and parcel of the change. So the report then discusses the significant work that's ahead to make the transformational change required to ensure that the intended outcomes of the Commission are realised. And just to remind people of the extent of that change, it's shifting from a time and task orientated delivery model to one which is flexible to meet people's outcomes. And at the same time, it's being delivered by a consortium arrangement. So that's where you've got third and independent sector providers coming to work together in a collaborative arrangement, which is a significant shift from where they had been previously. So what we're trying to do does require a significant operational and cultural change, not just for our own teams, but for the providers and also for members of the public. And we're doing it at a time when we're in the midst of a surge in a pandemic and winter. And also because of those things, at a time where we've got an associated change in demand, and I've described some of the reasons around that. So we get a sense that people are more reluctant to move into a care home setting. Now that might change over this coming year, we don't really know, but certainly we've seen that. So actually the demand for care at home has risen during the time that we've been going through this tender. The other contributing aspects to that are obviously that our daycare facilities have been closed, and we know that there's a significant level of carer stress and distress. I've also then gone to describe the plans that we have in place, or what we've been trying to do since the 1st of November. And a lot of the plans are really to make sure, in order for us to have a responsive care at home service, we need to make sure that we have the right capacity to meet people's needs. And that is difficult given what we know about the fluctuation in people's requirements just now. So we have concluded a review of care packages, both the care packages for those people who are deemed to have an unmet need. And an unmet need is really where there has been an open care search for people for 2 weeks, but that care search hasn't been concluded. So those people then are classed as having an unmet need. And we've also done some work to try and embed or try and create a sustainable review process for people who are currently receiving care within the consortium, and that's to ensure that there's an appropriate level of care that's being provided, but that care is directed towards meeting people's outcomes. The other aspects that we're trying to progress are the implementation of something called risk assessed care, where we see a greater but appropriate use of equipment and technology to deliver care, and also making sure that our workforce providing care have the right skills to provide care in an enabling way. And that means that each appropriate member of the Granite Care Consortium staff need to be trained in an enablement approach, and the number of staff members that equates to currently sits at just over 540. In terms of meeting the needs, the Granite Care Consortium has responded well to meeting any additional requests for care for people whom it already provides care for. And I'm glad to say that whilst they've taken a measured approach, because they had to go through all of the change of coming together as a consortium very quickly, they are now taking people or making offers to people who are sitting on the unmet need list. So the unmet need list, with the work that we've done to review that, and the people who have an unmet need being made an offer, that should start to show a more favourable position going forwards. So I suppose just to summarise, it's a fairly overwhelming challenge, or the overwhelming challenge is to ensure that we have sufficient capacity to deliver a responsive, outcomes-focused care at home service going forwards.
Right, thank you very much, Anne, for that very comprehensive summary of a very comprehensive report. Thank you. Comments and questions on this? Hi, Luann.
Thanks. And just to sort of clarify in my mind, so when it came to clinical care governance, our concern was that unmet need was going up, and we were wanting assurance that that was being managed and people weren't being left at high risk with no support. And what I'm reading from your report is there's been a review of all that, and actually the unmet need we thought was there isn't actually the correct number, because over 100 were no longer requiring services. Is that right, Anne? Am I in my understanding?
Well, yes. I think so. The unmet needs, the people requiring care, I mean, that number fluctuates, and I suppose that is a concern, and there is still work to be done around modelling for that. But yes, that review took place, and it did demonstrate that for several different reasons, maybe people didn't need the care anymore. Maybe the timing of the care assessment was out of kilter with assessment by other members of the multidisciplinary team, which actually shows that we should be looking at that assessment for care as a multidisciplinary team and making sure that we've got all of those findings pulled together. So there were several different reasons for why people were on that unmet need list, but actually it wasn't an appropriate. That number needed to be refreshed. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne. And I think my only other wider observation, really good to see the Granite City Consortium developing and getting bedded in, and that there was a very good transfer over. I suppose for me it's just seeing the interrelationship between care at home and what people do during the day, and hospital at home, and all the different community facing supports we have. And what would help me, and I know we've said this before, it's seeing how it all fits together, almost like I think in pictures. So the idea of having sort of a visual of how many people do we roughly have in this area, and how does it relate to what's going on in self-directed support, or the stay well, stay connected activities, and just being able to see them all mapped out would really help me. So I'm wondering if that's a topic for a future seminar, or take your lead on the timing of that, because I realise there's steps to go through, but it is the interconnectedness of all these parts coming together for me to have assurance that we are meeting needs that are there, and we're also thinking ahead to the future needs, and we've been able to do that in a very early intervention, preventative way. But that's just what's in my mind, is just seeing it all as a whole picture. But thank you for the report.
I mean, that's certainly the ambition, and I think the review of unmet need was really helpful in starting to establish almost subcategories. Seems to be the wrong word, but there were people where there had, for example, where there had been an additional request for care at home, but it wasn't necessarily because of the person's own requirement. It was because there was a significant level of carer stress and distress. So we've been able, with some of the other work which links to Stay Well, Stay Connected, working with public health, trying to reintroduce some of our buildings-based daycare facilities which had been closed, risk assess, because that sort of helped us to see that, make that link. And I think, but also it is helping us to understand what level of demand there is for that going forwards as we review and redesign. I think it is challenging because it's challenging to do something that related to the numbers because there's a risk of double counting almost, but to be able to show it as sort of almost as an illustration of how all these things link together, yeah, it's absolutely right. And care at home is a really good example, because for that to work, we need a responsive care at home system, or we need to be able to step up and step down that care really, really quickly to make sure that people don't go into hospital. So absolutely, they all link together, and trying to get them all to work at the same time is the ambition.
Okay, thank you. So maybe there's something for us to think about, the timing of when would be appropriate to look at that as a whole. Yeah, we can take that offline. Thank you.
Okay, John Tomlinson and then John Coke.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anne, for the report. It was very helpful to read that. I'm curious about the locality dimension, which was in the original conceit and of the model and the design. I know in the event the consortium won across the localities, and I know there's the choice of people is important, and as you say, a lot of them have stayed with those that they had as provider. Just to know, is that locality element still in there, and is that going to come through in due course in terms of efficiencies and the like?
I'm not sure about efficiency, so to speak. I think certainly the ambition is, you know, is for the localities element to be strengthened. And you're right, because it's a consortium that have won all three contracts, sometimes I think that does get lost in translation. So that's a piece of work that we do need to continue to stress. One of the opportunities that we have tried to progress is to link the sort of the operational representative for a locality for the consortium, and for example, into our enhanced care huddles on a daily basis, so that they're actually there being able to have that discussion with the wider multidisciplinary team. There's quite a lot of issues that we need to work through in terms of data sharing to allow that to happen, and that's being progressed from a locality basis. Also having the providers represented at our locality huddle, so they understand how that will be progressing. But I think certainly from when we're looking at the asset based, each locality will have its own assets. And I think that's the bit that we absolutely need to strengthen. But I think that kind of equally links into what Luann was saying about, you know, how do we get a read across all of the different aspects that we're trying to commission just now, so to try and tie all of that up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. And certainly it's not a criticism, because it's been a big piece of work, and I think everybody's done very well, and the right priorities have come first. So seeing that come through in due course will be good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. John Cook.
Thanks, and if I can add my thanks to Anne for a very good report and a very, very helpful walkthrough of it. I think this is really positive stuff. There's reference in the report, which I've now lost, to greater use of technology. I think it mentions near me. I wonder if you could just expand on some of the other technological things that we're going to be using.
Yeah, so the whole review is being able to conduct a review at a distance in a multidisciplinary way, you know, is a significant challenge just now. And but we've been able to work with the Scottish Government to try and test out using Near Me, and that basically allows the care manager to be on the end of a call, but the person, you can have 4 people around it. So it maybe allows the care manager, another member of the multidisciplinary team, the person receiving care, the member of care staff, or a member of their family to be on the call. So it's an inclusive process. So that's the use of Near Me. In terms of the technology, in terms of risk assessed care, that is us being able to look to use different pieces of equipment to help to deliver care. So different beds or what have you that can allow people to move more easily, potentially allow people to have only one carer rather than 2 carers. And we're working, as we're progressing that piece of work, we're working very closely with union colleagues, because it's really important that staff understand the reasons why we're progressing this. We've got good examples, a couple of good examples, particularly for younger people in receipt of care, where they feel more in control because they can use the technology themselves, so that it actually helps them to achieve their outcomes. So it's very early stages, and it's not just big pieces of equipment. You know, that quite a few people on the unmet need list were struggling to have a shower, but the provision of a long-handled sponge allowed people to look after them, you know, to be able to continue to do that for themselves, rather than having somebody to help them to do, you know, to have that shower. So it also allows people to participate more in what they want to be able to achieve. So it can be very small pieces of equipment or very big pieces of equipment as well.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Good. All right, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to come in myself. I had a question on the back of the fact that there were nearly 300 people stayed with their old provider who isn't part of the consortium. Does that mean we still then have a risk of needing to step in as provider of last resort if some of those providers decide to pull out of the city?
Yeah, so we have a risk log as part of our implementation group, and there is that. There's always going to be a risk of market failure, but I think with those providers, because the relationship is very much between the person and the provider, you know, we don't commission that, then I think we've got it within our sights that we need to maintain the connection with those providers, and we need to maintain our level of understanding about the potential risks. One of the things that we have recently introduced is, so you'll be aware that we have a care home support and assurance process. So we've implemented a non-residential support and assurance process, and we have a daily report from providers which is linked to things like testing for COVID or you know, any sort of issues with day-to-day operational delivery of services, and that extends to those providers who are providing under option 2. So we're hoping that through that process they'll see that as a positive supportive process, so we build that link and relationship, so we would have an early warning about whether or not, you know, that those providers were unable to continue. We were really concerned about it in the first couple of months after the transition, but things, you know, those providers still seem to be operating quite successfully with their clients. So yeah, it is a risk, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on.
I mean, part of the rationale for moving to this sort of new way of doing things, collaborative and rather than competitive and outcomes focused enablement process, was to reduce our risk of market failure risk. So yeah, okay, that I'm assured by the answer that you've given. My other question, sorry, do you want to?
No, I think we were. This was something that we, as I said, we given the previous trends, we couldn't have predicted that this would have happened. So that's why it was so concerning at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, the modelling for the change of desired outcomes now, you know, people not wanting to go into care homes anymore because of the experience during COVID. I don't suppose we're going to know whether that's a permanent change of behaviours or just a temporary one for a while yet. So yeah. The other question I wanted to ask was about the whole process of assessing need on a multidisciplinary team basis. And it sounds like a lot of work has been done on that. Is that kind of an improvement project that you're doing to change the old way of assessment to doing it in a more holistic way, and streamlining the processes so assessments can be done quicker?
Yeah, so the review of the unmet need, I don't know if it's I think it is trying to I don't think we're adopting improvement methodology in its truest form. I think certainly the review of current clients, there's more of an improvement methodology approach being taken with that, and certainly the use of near me testing that out, but trying to, yes, absolutely trying to make that as smooth as possible and as streamlined as possible. I suppose in my head, working in localities should help that move forwards, because people have got a greater connection with each other, and therefore so I think that will help going forward. So yeah, we are trying to make it as streamlined as we possibly can, and what we've learned is the timing of that assessment obviously is quite crucial as well, because we can assess for a care need, but that's before the physiotherapist or occupational therapist, say for example, has assessed somebody. So pulling all of those assessments together is really quite helpful.
Okay, right, that's fine. Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Okay, there's no other questions, so we're just asked to note the report and the recommendation on page 107. So I think we're happy to do that, and thank you for the assurance that you've given us on that today. Right, we're now back to item 10, which is the public paper on the annual procurement plan. I'm just going to bring that up on my back. So I think it's Jean who's going to be speaking to this.
Yes, Chair, sorry, I'm just getting back to that.
Yeah.
In the pack. Yeah. So this is the regular annual procurement plan. This for the coming financial year 2021 to 22. There is an accompanying spreadsheet that shows all the various different procurements that we're asking to be approved. There is no new expenditure really in this report. It's the items on the report are all fairly standard. There's not a lot of new expenditure there at all. There are 11 items on the report, mostly extension to existing services, to existing contracts, so that we can provide continuity of care for service users. And there's some increased expenditure under the supported living framework, and that's just intended to take account of services that are being incorporated into that from other contracts. So once again, that's not new expenditure. And the sorry, just fumbling a bit here to get to the right part of the report. Each entry on the work plan sets out either a single or a group of contracts that are due to expire in the coming year. The full report, the business cases and the full report in the private papers includes all the financial values as well, and the details of the actual contracts themselves. There are clear links with strategic commissioning, so nothing that we do in procurement sits on its own. It's all linked to the strategic commissioning plan, and everything that's on this report has been to the new Commissioning and Procurement Board for approval there before it comes here to the IJB. The only thing to say about finance is that in the part of the paper where there is the financial detail, we have made an allowance for an uplift in contract rates, but the actual uplift is dependent on budgets which are not yet confirmed, are not likely to be confirmed until the end of March, at which point we will work with finance colleagues to ensure that the right uplift is given to any contracts that are entitled to have an uplift, and that'll mostly be around ensuring that providers can continue to fund the increases in living wage. And I think that's really the main details of the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Jean. Does anybody have any general questions, not on the detail of the business cases at this point, because we need to cover that in the private session. We can't go into details of providers or contract terms or the finances in the public session. So Luann, your hand first, and then John Cook.
Thanks, Sarah. No questions because mine are specific, but I just wanted to note that Jean Stewart-Coxon is retiring and put on record our thanks to Jean for her expert advice and support that she's given to the IJB over the years, and her patience when I've asked lots of daft lassie questions. So really grateful to Jean's input over the years on the IJB, and just want to send our best wishes for a long and happy retirement, Jean. So if we can have that recorded, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for those kind words, and in turn I would just like to thank the IJB for all the appreciation of the work that my team has done whilst I've been in the driving seat, and to assure you that my replacement will continue to provide you with I hope, an excellent service.
Yes, thank you. I'd echo Luann's comments, absolutely. Procurement is something that most people glaze over at and get a bit worried about, and you've managed to demystify it for a lot of people on the board. So thank you very much for all of that, and for being, and actually, as Luann says, for your patience. Some of our more idiotic questions about. Okay, we have John Cook. He's got his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a generic question that can be answered in the public session, but if you don't want to, put me on the straight and narrow again. It's kind of not to do with the specific numbers or even to do with any specific of the contracts, but there are a number of them where we are extending to allow a move from block purchasing to spot purchasing. And there are a couple of comments in several of the papers that say we're doing that because it is better value for money. There are also a couple of comments around the fact that that carries the risk to some providers that they've got less certainty about the income that they'll get, and therefore is that raising a concern about potential risk of market failure. So I just wondered if you could kind of expand a bit on why it's better for value for money and the extent to which we should be worried about providers failing. And as I say, if you prefer to take that in private, that's fine.
No, that's a very good question to ask in public, John. Thank you. Jean.
Yeah, and I can give you a general response to that without kind of going into the details of any of the specifics. I think that, you know, procurement always comes with risks, no matter how we do things. I think in this particular case, in times gone by, there had been a desire to make sure that the city could secure all the places in a service, and that was the reason for block funding. However, that has meant that in some cases the City Council has been funding voids, and it's prevented the provider from allowing those voids to be filled by anybody else, you know, people from other local authorities that might have needed that place. So by freeing that up, the idea is that there's less risk to the City Council, and it shouldn't increase the risk to providers, because if there's demand for the places, then they will be filled, albeit not necessarily by the City Council. I think it's fair to say as well that all this will be done in consultation with providers. So, you know, discussions will already be starting to take place about these changes. And also it will be done in conjunction with the commissioning and procurement group. So not just procurement acting on our own to make changes to these contracts. Apologise, I have a young puppy in the background. It's scrabbling at the door here, so I'm sorry about the background noise there. So yes, that will be done in consultation with the commissioning and procurement group and in consultation with providers. But we don't imagine that there will be an increased risk of provider failure through this activity. And certainly the commissioning activity is going to look at the longer term about shifting I think it's been mentioned previously when talking about Anne's report that the demand for residential places, for example, may not come back to the previous levels. So, how do we deal with that in the longer term? I hope that's answered your question, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, it has, and that was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you also for not making me glaze over when talking about procurement, which I have done on some other occasions in other settings.
Okay.
Health and social care is just intrinsically more interesting, John. Right, we don't have any more questions in the public session, so I think we'll draw the public session of the meeting to a close. We're not able to approve the recommendations in this report until we've had the questions answered in the private session, but whatever decision we make will be recorded in the minutes, so people are clear about that. So Derek, if you could turn off the recording so we could go into private session, please.